Welcome to the program's dialogue. This is a series of events in preparation of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, one of the partnerships under preparation for Horizon Europe, the new framework program for research and development. This series of events is facilitating a dialogue between ERANETs with their successful formats and with their experiences of the last 10 years and national program owners and program managers. The event series is hosted by the joint programming platform Smart Energy Systems. Please be aware that the events are provided on our YouTube channel as a live stream and as a recording, resulting in the fact that whatever you contribute in the chat or via live talk will be public. The Clean Energy Transition Partnership is going to be a transnational joint programming initiative to boost and accelerate the energy transition, building upon regional and national RDI funding programs. Therefore, the program's dialogue intends to create joint knowledge about the most powerful and successful formats and tools to promote research, technology development, and innovation. In a mutual learning and capacity building exercise, we want to learn about good practices, successful activities, effective approaches, but also about the things we tried to do and that did not work out. For this, we want to create together with you an open and interactive atmosphere. The dialogue events are organized in a SureFix mode every Friday at 11 a.m. on this YouTube channel. Each event will present one or a group of initiatives, and we have already a dense schedule until mid-March. However, if you want to present your program or initiative and you are not on the list yet, please let us know and we will find a slot for you. Each of the events will have the same format of presentation blocks of about 10 to 15 minutes, highlighting a specific topic or aspect, followed by a question and answer and discussion session of about 10 minutes. If you have a question, please use the chat function in the YouTube channel. We will bring it up. You want to get on stage and discuss live with the speakers? Send your request in the chat. We will bring you up on stage. The process to develop the Clean Energy Transition Partnership has come a long way. We have started with a stakeholder groups dialogue with all the set plan initiatives and ERANETs, developing thematic RDI challenges in spring and summer last year. Based on these inputs in a country's dialogue, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda was developed and launched in a set plan conference side event in November 2020. Now we want to bring together all the partners, funding institutions, ministries, program managers and program owners that are ready to contribute to the implementation of this new joint programming initiative. The number of countries and regions joining has been growing and growing over the last months, and there are still new partners coming on board. A great core team of enthusiastic experts from different organizations all over Europe is committed to bring this initiative forward. Enjoy the program's dialogue. And now let us introduce the speakers of today. Yes, hello and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining again on this Friday. We all recognize that my short introduction video is step by step becoming a little bit outdated as we are reaching already the end of our dialogue series. Nevertheless, we have some things ahead of us. Today, we have this very interesting meeting with our friends from the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic. And there are also some events ahead of us where we are going to talk about examples of mission-oriented or challenge-driven national programs that have been successful over the last years because the CETP has identified challenges to implement its strategic research and innovation agenda. So we want to have a little bit of a closer look. What does it mean to do programming for challenge-driven or mission-oriented programs? And we'll have some examples. Next week we are starting with examples from Austria. That's the program Stadt der Zukunft and Vorzeigeregion Energie. And we will go on then on the 16th of April with examples from RVO from the Netherlands of interesting program formats and viable cities from Sweden on the 23rd of April. So stay tuned on the channel. We are still going on. We are changing the scope a little bit from AirNet to national programs. But today we are still focusing on the AirNets and building the bridge to the national programs because our friends from the Czech Republic National Agency of Technology have prepared some interesting presentations around the question, what is our homework with our national agencies, with our national programs that we have to do to be able to successfully participate in this kind of transnational joint programming in activities like the AirNets and the AirNet co-funds have been so far, and as the Clean Energy Transition Partnership is going to be in the future. So that's a very interesting topic that you are raising, and I welcome very much Baja Barbora Nunez from the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic and Michaela Kriklanova, also from the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic. As always, good morning, welcome, and as always, accompanying myself, and thank you very much for your commitment and presence, my dear co-moderators, Gary Brembrook from the Netherlands Enterprise Agency and Fredrik Lundström from the Swedish Energy Agency. Hi, and good morning. Thank you, as always, the great supporting team, Nicolas Reschen from the Austrian Ministry of Climate Action and Dirk Kuckertz from the sound studio in Eschweiler. Hi. So I think we are ready to start. Good morning, everyone. Can you, Baja and Michaela, say a few words about your agency? Maybe it's coming also in the presentation, but a few words about your personal background. What is your educational background? Are you technicians, or in which field have you been active, and what's your role in your agency, and what is the role of your agency in your country? Very briefly.
So I'm going to start. Good morning, everybody. In fact, it was part of the presentation, but we can just introduce ourselves as we speak. So my name is Baja Nunez. I am a project officer at the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic.
So how does it come? Your name does not sound so Czech to me, but
It's not. Good catch. It's not. In fact, I married a Colombian and I took his name, hence the last name.
So that's how this came about. Okay, very good.
And so my background is in social psychology, actually,
Ah,
which is completely off topic. It has absolutely nothing to do with energy, but we are
very
doing our
good.
best to catch
This
up.
is competences that we need for the energy transition.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to contribute. And perhaps I would pass the stage to my colleague Michaela Křiklanova.
Thank you, Ba. So hello, everyone. My name is Michaela Křiklanova, and my background is I studied politics and international relations, and now I work at a technology agency as a AirNet co-founder project officer as well, and I take care of the implementation of the calls on the national level.
Cool. And your agency, the technology agency of the Czech Republic. So as I understand, this is a funding agency in the Czech Republic, right?
Yes.
How long does it exist?
About 11 years. It's a relatively new agency, and it's reflected in our background and our know-how. We have just started in the international cooperation, but we like to think we are learning quickly.
Cool. Very good. So that's very interesting also that from this background you are raising this topic. I think very interesting for many of the future participants of the CETP. We might have participants that are used to this kind of transnational collaborations for many years, but there will also be some newcomers, and everyone can only benefit from the topics that you are going to raise today. So let's jump into the first block of the presentations. Looking to my agenda that Nicolas has prepared for me, the first session is called Finding Our Way to AirNet Co-Funds, and this will be presented by Baya and Michaela together, I think. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I hope you can see the slides. Nobody's complaining, so I'm going to assume that you can see them.
All good.
Good. So my first words were actually dedicated to the short introduction that we have just done. A little bit more words, little few more words about the agency we represent. The TACR, which is short for the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic, is actually a national funding agency, and we support mostly applied research. There is another funding agency on the exact same level in the Czech Republic, which only focuses on basic research. So this is the main distinction. And me and my colleague, we represent the Department of the International Cooperation, which covers work on the AirNet co-funds, but also other international projects and programs that you will soon hear more about. And now I would like to pass the stage again to my colleague who will tell you more about what the agency does.
Thank you, Baya. Next slide, please. Yes, next one. Thank you. Okay, so as it was mentioned by my colleague Baya, the Technology Agency of the Czech Republic is a government organization in charge of R&D funding. We are the principal organization which funds applied research, as you already know, and we were founded in 2009, so we exist for almost 12 years now. TACR distributes funding based on programs which are focused on specific domains which respond to the needs of the society and the market. And our principal aim is to support closer collaboration between academia, the business sector, and the state administration. So we develop new tools in order to link those different realms. TACR is responsible to the Research, Development and Innovation Council of the Czech Republic, which is led directly by the Prime Minister. Next slide. So this is just a brief overview of the R&D funding landscape in the Czech Republic. So just to underline some of the actors, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport is the central administrative office, which is responsible for research and development. Then the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Industry and Trade. These are some of the program owners of programs through which we fund research at the technology agency. So we are going to talk about our cooperation with them later on in the second block. Next slide, please. Okay, here you can see an overview of the calls for proposals that we plan or that we have already announced in the first months of 2021. So as you can see, we are planning quite a lot of international calls, out of which 9 are AirNet co-fund calls. The international calls are the ones in blue. And also we have our own international call called Delta, which focuses on bilateral cooperation with countries primarily outside of the European Economic Area. And we also have the Gamma program, which supports SMEs. And from our national programs, you can see 6 different calls that we're planning. 4 out of those are ministerial funding programs. So those are the ones with the asterisk here. Next slide, please. This here is an overview of our international cooperation, of the networks that we are members of, and of the different funding programs that we have. So here you can see the different AirNets that we are members of. It's some 10 AirNets, which are each of them focused on a different thematic domain. Then we are members of TUFTI, which is the European Association of Leading National Innovation Agencies. And then you can see our own programs on international cooperation, which is the CAPA program, funded under the EEA and OA grants, and Delta program, which is focused on, as I said, bilateral cooperation between Czech researchers and countries from outside the European Economic Area. Next slide. So over the past 12 years, TCR has been able to support over 3,000 Czech research projects. We have distributed funding of over 40 billion Czech crowns. And this funding has been granted to over 3,700 business project participants and 4,300 research organization participants. Up to now, we have been managing 18 funding programs with the average funding intensity of 69%, but this differs for every program and every call based on its aim. Thank you. So now I will pass the floor back to my colleague Baya, who will give you an introduction of how we started with AirNets in the first place.
Thank you, Michaela. I will take over here. Let me just switch the slides again. All right. So I would like to share with you a bit about how TACR started to get involved in AirNet co-funds and what we have learned on the way. As you have heard, TACR is a relatively new agency, and when it comes to international cooperation, we started very slow in 2015 when we became an observer in a CSA project, which was called GenderNet. And at the time, we didn't know much about the Horizon 2020 instruments, and it has been a struggle, to be honest, to pull off on the national level, but also on the international level. However, 2 years later, we became a full member of our first AirNet called GenderNet Plus, which was following the previously run CSA. And then we also got membership at AirNet Xystera 3. Also, others followed, which my colleague has already introduced. But at this very moment, we are part of 13 AirNets, 5 CSA projects, and we coordinate 2 of those. We are twice an ERANET co-fund work package leader, and we lead 8 ERANET co-fund tasks. We are currently preparing our participation in 4 European partnerships. And besides those, we are also involved in international cooperation activities other than ERANET co-fund instruments. We are members of international networks and programs, and we offer opportunities for bilateral international cooperation to projects, which we have already mentioned. In other words, the Horizon instruments are not such a challenge for us anymore, thank God. But when we started 5 years ago, we had no experience. It was a blank page situation, and there was a lot to prepare and overcome for us to be part of it. The greatest challenge we have faced and successfully resolved were the limits imposed by the agency on the agency by the legal framework, which was defining our role and rules of the funding that we were allowed to provide. Specifically, according to the interpretation of our legal framework at that time, we could only grant financial support based on a public call. And the law didn't explicitly say that an international call is not enough, but at the same time, it didn't confirm that it was enough either. And based on that, we believe that we were obligated to open a national call for every international call we participated in. And according to that information, to the information we gathered, some agencies were facing the same problem, and they resolved it by organizing a national call during the international call. And so we decided we could do one at the end of the evaluation process once the international decision was taken. But you can imagine the administrative burden resulting from that, not only for us, but also for the applicants and partially also for the whole consortium. For one, there was all the admin related to opening a call for exactly 43 days and performing the eligibility check and evaluation, announcements, fulfilling the legal obligation, setting up a brand new process, gathering the evaluators, training them in what exactly is needed for this actually completely senseless evaluation. On the other hand, there were applicants having a decision letter in hand, applying for national call for basically no rational reason, not knowing for sure whether they would be funded after all, and having to wait for 4 months to start the realization or they could actually start early, but that would make the cost for the first 4 months ineligible, so nobody really wanted that. Well, and to avoid that, to avoid this struggle, we try to coordinate the international processes in the way that we opened the call early, and we just prayed for nothing on the international level to get delayed, which, as you can probably imagine, was a nightmare because something was always delayed all the time, and we ended up having a national call open for months instead of just 43 days. We were redoing all the announcements, all the official bookings, or the internal and external approvals. The evaluators were waiting, the applicants were nervous. Well, it was not good. But most importantly, one condition for participation at this national call, this like an official national call, was having a decision letter from an international evaluation. And so the national evaluation simply had to go through. We didn't have really an option to just to stop it and not fund some of those projects. And therefore, in a nutshell, it was just for show. It was an enormous effort just for show. In addition, projects with the Czech applicants had to wait to start, which was inconveniencing them, but also the consortium, where all projects should be approximately at the same level in the realization phase, mostly for monitoring purposes and the kickoff purposes. And besides, we had no experience at the time, and we were learning call by call, so we had to react very quickly to the issues we have discovered and change the processes from one call to another, which was a period of maybe 6 months. And that was very fast, and to be honest, it was very exhausting. And in our experience, some FPOs still struggle with a similar issue, which is why we raised it today. So, how we resolve this problem? We reached out to the Ministry of Education, who is the national contact point for international cooperation in research, and we asked for a revision of the legal framework. We found an interpretation of the law that didn't oblige us to go through this administrative step. And this interpretation said that the international evaluation serves as a sufficient grounds for funding. And since then, we skip this national call and we proceed to contractualization of the Czech party directly after the decision of funding is made on the international level. And as a consequence, the Czech participants are able to start immediately. In fact, they are obligated to start maximum 4 months after the results of the international evaluation is out. Also, the processes don't change so much anymore. So we could stabilize it, we could prepare stable templates, education materials for all parties, and consequently, the administrative burden is reduced for all parties, and we now reach a higher flexibility, earliest start of the project, and in general, we are going for maximum possible flexibility for all aspects of ERNET co-fund management, not just this, as we found over time that with goodwill, processes can be simplified and adjusted. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for this first insights and block of presentation. Yeah, impressive figures, particularly the transnational joint calls you have announced already for this year. That was really an impressive one. So you're doing a lot there, and very interesting approaches how you tried to solve these problems that many of us are facing. Fredrik and Gerdi, any observations from your side on what has been presented?
I think, I mean, first of all, thanks for a very good and interesting presentation. I must say I'm very impressed because I think that both the clarity on how you describe your process on involving in these type of activities and your learning, from the way you presented, it sounds like you come from a place where this was, as you said, completely new, and that you would be sort of like a rookie in the knowledge. But from what you described, I think you probably it seems like you have much more knowledge and understanding than most of us funding partners about how these processes relate. And I think one reason might be also that sometimes the knowledge gets distributed among different parts of one organization, and it's not connected. And from that point of view, I think also how you try to improve it by going to the ministry and to really do an improvement of the process. These are things that I think for many funding agencies probably are something that could be used as a best practice. Then it won't probably work for all of us. What I think is then the process that you described with the shadow or parallel call, I think still is the practice for many countries. Then to what extent it means something, if it's only an administrative process or if it has a value creation, that differs. But yeah, maybe I don't have any clear, I have one clear question that I would like to ask. So the next step, so now if you join the partnership and with the experience you have, I guess this put also an expectation on what is in the international call text and how that process can be improved, because you can clearly improve on your national process. Are there some, based on your experience, what would you, are there some areas where you would point to, here we would like to have some development on how we do it jointly also for it to be further and more efficient from your point of view?
Well, thank you so much for the praise, first of all. We are glad that you like the presentation. Yes, we believe that some partners, some European agencies still struggle with the shadow call, and it's very tedious. For us, we had to adjust it simply because we were kind of running out of breath. It was, as I said, it was just a nightmare, and this simplified everything for everybody. And when it comes to the partnerships, honestly, we do not dare to provide advice in this area because we don't have much experience with leading international operations and international activities. However, perhaps what I can repeat from my presentation, we believe that if members and partners approach the processes with more flexibility, with the attitude that things can be changed and they want to change things and they want to simplify things, and they when the processes are not so rigid, good results always come up in our opinion.
Good point.
Yeah.
Gedi, something you want to mention?
Yes, well, I must also say congratulations to what you've been able to do in your agencies. Very good, and I think that this is really an helpful example of what can be done. I would be interested, and maybe this comes later, how there will be some national targets related to what you are funding. You're participating in AeroNets, and are there also requirements that need to be met nationally, or is this really limited? And how does that reflect in national eligibility of some proposals?
So perhaps I will share this answer with my colleague, but I will start. When it comes to the targets, in fact we do not have targets on how many projects, on how many Aeronet co-funds we should be part of. However, all the national programs are conditioned to be involved in international cooperation. This is part of the national strategy. This is something that the whole country wants to follow, and international cooperation has value for us. So we do not have targets in terms of numbers, but perhaps in terms of direction. Also, the national programs, they all very clearly define the priorities, and every project we end up funding needs to fulfill these priorities of the national program. But I guess it's quite common, I guess, not just for Czech Republic but also for other countries.
Sure.
Yeah, and I will just join on the eligibility part. So I will talk about this more in detail in the second part. But also, what is quite important is we are somehow restrained by the funding program as well regarding the eligibility. So this is also one thing that is quite challenging for us at the moment, because we actually have to check with every project that it's in line with the funding program. So this is a bit of extra work for us that we still have to do on the national level, but there's so far no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
We also got a question in the chat. Maybe Nicolas, you could take that in. Francesco Basile from Italy is writing, and maybe that points me to the fact that maybe not everyone might have understood the difference between the joint call on the transnational level and the national call. Maybe you, in 2 sentences, could clarify that a little bit more.
Certainly. So in summary, originally we believed that the law was obligating us, every time we took part of an Aeronet co-fund and a transnational call, we believed that the law was obligating us to create a separate national call on the side of the international joint call. So basically the purpose of the 2 calls would be the same: to identify projects to fund in the exact same topic, in the exact same priority, but there, instead of having just one transnational call and select projects there and fund them, we had to have a transnational call, select projects there, and then having a national call, officially select projects there, and then fund them.
Yeah, so it's not so much like Francesco seems to understand that there was a selection of projects without the call. It's just, it was a way to kind of get rid of this double procedure that you had to do and just to rely on the transnational procedures and not having to do a separate parallel procedure on the national level.
That's right.
That has to be understood.
That's right.
We, of course, also share that Francesco is saying in the chat, I also, of course, join the congratulations for the very impressive work. So we, of course, share this also with you. Do we have other questions to discuss at the moment? Fredrik, Gerdi, do you have any remarks, questions? At the moment, we don't have anything in the chat. So maybe I propose that we jump over to the next presentation session, if you agree with this. And this is headed Cooperation of Program Owner and Program Manager. Also an interesting focus that you're setting here. And please, the floor is yours for the second part of the presentation.
Thank you. So yes, this is the next topic. You have already seen this slide. So maybe let me introduce the topic a little bit. So this block is focused on how TACR, in the role of program manager, cooperates with the respective ministry in the role of a program owner. This is a topic that we have noticed kind of resonates in the preparation of the European partnerships. So we would like to share the experience on how we approach it on the national level. So this is a slide which serves as a reminder of the fact that in the Czech Republic and the Czech research funding environment, there are many players. Many programs are owned by a ministry, but they are at the same time managed by the research funding organization, which in this case would be TACR. In fact, in this partnership in CETP, there are two Czech ministries that TACR shares programs with in this way. And in some cases, we have noticed that cooperation between these two positions can be complicated, not just on the national side, but in general on the global point of view. And it certainly requires good communication and mutual understanding, which is quite obvious. It will be, in our opinion, particularly relevant in European partnerships where there will often be more than one player from a country. And we believe that in the Czech Republic, we manage this quite successfully. And so here is how we manage it. In our environment, the program
Sorry,
owner...
just a very quick question. As this on the picture before, there are some ministries that are on the side where the more what I would expect program managers are. Can you just explain why they are on the other side?
In fact, that doesn't have any significance when it comes to the position of the ministry. It's just graphics. It's just a picture. We can switch them around. They're all equally.
I understand, but does it mean that they also have an implementation role so they have a program manager role also?
Yes, of course.
Okay, that's what I understand. Sorry, thanks a lot for clarification.
So in our environment, the program owner and the program manager have a very clearly defined role, which is probably the most important information in this whole presentation. If you just remember this, it will be enough. In some programs, these two roles are covered by the same party, as Mikhail has just pointed out, but sometimes they are divided between two organizations. And there are exceptions, but usually this is how it works. The TACR is the National Funding Agency for Applied Research, and in many cases, it is the program manager. And it is therefore an active member of the Eranet Co-Fund Consortium. We cover operations, around the ERANET co-fund project, we cover tasks that are related to the management of the transnational calls. Specifically, the TACR is responsible for obtaining the membership at the co-fund project. We are responsible for signing the consortium agreement and the grant agreement and Annex A. We prepare the national conditions that are usually annexed to the call text. We process the contracts with the funded projects. We transfer the funding to the funded projects, and then we perform the required reporting. If relevant, we also perform or lead tasks and possibly also work packages in the work plan. On the other hand, the ministry is the program owner in many cases, and again, this is not always, but in many cases, this is the program owner, and they have a strategic role in the processes, which could be described as sort of an advisory body. They officially nominate the ACR to enter an ERANET project they will find relevant to the national strategies. So they first have to evaluate this. And they also have to decide whether the ERANET is fulfilling the needs of the research community. Then they review and comment on the SRIA and the core topics, and they are members of strategic working groups, and they also sign the Annex B to the grant agreement. Besides this, and there are also some tasks that are performed by both parties, such as the eligibility check, the check of alignment of the ERANET agenda and the funding programs. There are nominations of the evaluation panel and well, the actual promotion of the transnational call, and these tasks are done in tandem. Still, of course, there are some bottlenecks in the process. They mostly come from the fact that the roles are logically performed by different people who are located in different places. And so no one cannot just walk to the office across the hall and ask something or have a coffee break while discussing the next steps. And this leads to at least in our case, sometimes it leads to hesitation to ask something or speak up when it's needed. Also, each organization follows a different agenda and perspective, leading to slight differences in goals or directions. And we have different experience and expertise that define our point of view. So both parties also perform different agendas, and they have limited time capacities, which is, of course, obvious. Another important bottleneck is cooperation with the third parties, such as other institutions and other institutions that support research in the same environment. And it is not always easy to share the exact same message and keep each other up to date about each relevant interaction. And it requires formulation of a common strategy on how to approach these parties in the same matter and continuous alignment with each other. And finally, each party performs a different task corresponding to their expertise, and that is a good thing. But at the same time, again, sometimes it is hard to follow the same priorities. In our experience, the only way forward is alignment and cooperation, which you might think it's absolutely obvious and there is no point to point this out. But at the same time, even though we know that, sometimes we don't always follow this. So we figure, why not just state the obvious and just remind of the obvious rules of success. So first, we define each other's responsibilities in a document for further reference, mostly, and standardization and official contact for each agenda. However, the document allows for flexibility, and this is very important. For example, it doesn't say that a party A must provide feedback in a specific time limit. It just says that a party A is responsible for a list of tasks and party B is responsible for the other list of tasks. And it also says when approximately these tasks should be happening. However, we are still taking on new responsibilities in an international consortium, and they require new processes. Like now, we are coordinating a transnational call. It's an alignment call, and the timing of the respective steps is completely off the chart. So we must make sure that the system that we have set up is not too restrictive for us to complete these tasks. And second, communication is key. Again, stating the obvious, but why not? We do semi-regular updates and meetings to keep each other up to date, and we find common pathway. And sometimes these meetings are scheduled in a formal way, and they are done in a formal process that has a formal format with minutes and so on. And sometimes the meetings are ad hoc and they are informal, reacting to an acute need. In our opinion, they are both very important, and they both have a space and place in the process. Then there is the matter of communication from the outside. We personally believe that it is better to divide different sources of information between the parties, if possible, of course, to decrease the administrative burden and leverage each party's expertise. However, it is important to plan who is part of which communication and why, and we are trying to keep the division logical and agree on why and all the necessary steps around we agree on beforehand, such as we will be in this mailing list and you will be in the other mailing list because of these aspects of the content and so on. But then it is very important to share the highlights from each of the sources, which is sometimes problematic, and this could be a bottleneck. Third, we use a shared platform to share information, documents, and materials. And to be honest, it's not always welcome, but once it is adopted and accepted, it saves a lot of time and effort. So we definitely recommend this. 4, it is always better to ask and align on the strategy before acting. This would be my personal weak point. I sometimes take action before talking to the others, so I would not recommend doing that. So this is why, again, stating the obvious. And finally, the most important thing is, of course, to build mutual trust and respect. And keep in mind that the added value of doing things in tandem, there are many. More expertise is always better than less expertise. In addition, the differences in experience provide opportunities for mutual learning, and there are some great minds on each side. After all, we do have many differences, but we also have much in common. In an ERANET co-fund or in an European partnership, we have the same objective, which is funding excellent projects. And with that in mind, in our opinion, everything can be overcome. So, next slide. So now a few more words about the task division. Here is a clear overview of who does what. As you can see, a lot is shared work. In a nutshell, both parties evaluate the area of the ERANET co-fund action, but it is the ministry who checks that the objectives and the topics of the action meet the objectives of their respective funding program. Then one party, which is most often the ministry, measures interest in the action among the researchers. The co-fund proposal is covered by the ministry from the strategy point of view, and the operations and logistics are on the side of the ACR, of the program manager. Financial contribution is set by both parties. Usually, the program manager, which is us, makes a proposal based on some previous experience, and then it is reviewed by the program owner and approved of or modified. Then the ACR covers the contractual matters for the consortium agreement and the grant agreement, of course, except for Annex B, which is signed by the program owner. The call text is mostly covered by the program manager, except for the topics where the program owner plays a key role. The MOU and possibly the data protection agreement is also signed by the program manager. On the other hand, they both promote the transnational call. This is important. The eligibility check is divided between the parties. Again, the strategy versus operation, but the funding is actually transferred by the program manager. So far, only TACR, the program manager, has been performing the work plan tasks and the work packages, but it doesn't mean that the program owner couldn't. We're actually now thinking about that again. In the partnerships, that will be possible, but in an Ethernet co-fund, it does mean that they couldn't because they are not actually the full member. And here is the overview of responsibilities per party. Specifically, this would be the program owner. Besides the alignment of the area and topics with the respective program, the ministry checks if there is sufficient budget available in the program. They also check if the Eranet co-fund topics fit sufficient interest in the research community, and also the national conditions of the Eranet co-fund calls set by the program manager, which would be us, whether they correspond to the respective funding program. In the European partnerships, the ministry also reviews the SRIA, and they cover the contact with the research community and stakeholders in public consultation. And finally, the ministry will be covering the strategic monitoring tasks and related operations. So on the other hand, the program manager makes recommendations about the budget, and they also make sure that the budget can handle it from a longer point of view. During the preparation phase, we check that the envisioned operations and logistics of the Eranet co-fund are feasible on the national level. For instance, we check that the timeline of the Eranet co-fund corresponds to the needs of the research community and our milestones. We check that the Eranet co-fund call and the call text, whether they correspond to the national conditions. And also we actually prepare the national conditions. So this is a double barrel. Sometimes we check if the Eranet co-fund topics find sufficient interest in the research community, but as I said, most of the time this would be role of the ministry. But sometimes it has happened before. During the realization phase, we participate in the co-fund action monitoring and processes, and we process the report from the funded projects who report to the International Eranet Co-Fund Consortium. But also, the program manager reports separately within the tasks and within the work program. And now we have some specific examples that will be presented by my colleague Michaela. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm going to pass the stage.
Thank you, Bayo. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so now I will tell you a bit about the process of the eligibility check, which we do at TCR, but actually the program owner, the ministry, is sometimes part of it too.
Michaela, may I ask you a favor? Sorry, maybe changing the agenda a little bit at the moment, and I hope this doesn't bring you out of your concept too much, but I think as this was very interesting until now, before we go into the more detailed practical issues, can we just maybe discuss a few questions on this basic presentation of this topic that you've given? I think that's very interesting, and just not to lose the questions on this when we jump already in the practical details. One question that I would have, and maybe Gerdi and Fredrik have also some contributions to this, and we have also one question from the audience on this, would be given these shared roles, and you have made it very clear which processes also the needs on the national level to coordinate between these two entities, the program manager and the program owner, in case that this is a split role. The question to me is, within the CETP, how can we best support this? Because one attempt that I had already before, when we set up the ERANET or Joint Programming Platform Smart Energy Systems was to try to invite the program owners, so the ministries, to be part of the action itself. So to become members of the steering board, to become official partners also within the grant agreement with the Commission. But it turned out that this took only place in 2 or 3 cases, and only over a certain time then they stepped out again, because there was not so much relevance for them in the steering board meetings, or so they were happier to get this somehow condensed and digested from their national agency and then presented, I think, rather in the form that you were talking about it. Is that common sense? Do you have the same assumptions here? Is it better to leave it? I mean, it's on an individual basis anyhow. I mean, the countries will have to decide if they send the program owners in the steering board and the program manager to the operational level, or both on both sides. They will have to decide themselves. But I mean, it's nearly a tutorial that you're giving, I think, to our national partners, and that's really great. And to bring that more to the point is, I think, of interest. So what is your thoughts about this?
So thank you for the question. In fact, yes, we have the same experience. And again, I cannot, we do not have so much experience. And perhaps this would also be a question for the given ministry, which might be actually watching. And perhaps it would be better to ask them about their position. But from our point of view and from our experience, it in fact does make sense to have only one party in an ERANET co-fund as the member of the joint call and the consortium. Mostly because in our point of view, the joint call is actually dealing mostly with the operations of the joint call, less of a strategy. On the other hand, it might be meaningful to have the ministry involved in the additional activities. We have never tried this, but I guess it would make sense. When we need the advisory side and we need some consultation on the strategy, we usually reach out to them without involving them through the international network. And so far that has been working fine. On the other hand, in the partnerships, which are mostly focused on the strategy and the additional activities, and the joint calls are not the primary role of the consortium. I mean, they are an important role, obviously, but it's not the only role. In that case, I believe that it is set up just well as it is to offer and encourage ministries to take part, mostly because agencies like us, like TACR, we would never be able to take over the strategic side, and we are not even interested, to be honest. We do not have the human resources, we do not have the capacity, we do not have the know-how. And we are very happy that we can work with the expert, which is the ministry, and we are happy that they have the opportunity to be part of the consortium. And on the other hand, we still have the chance to split the activities where it makes sense. Therefore, the agency covers the operation while the ministry covers the strategy. Does this answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Thanks for your perspectives. Any other remarks to this? Of course, we will have to discuss that when we design the CETP anyhow, but I think it's a relevant question that is related to what you were presenting. We have one question from Susanne. Yeah, Gerdy, please go on. Sorry.
Yes, well, what I would like to observe is that these roles are differently placed in various countries as well. So maybe it's good to. I found this a very welcome presentation because it sets out some of the questions that countries have to ask themselves. How are we going to organize our contribution to CETP? But you have to look at the national conditions as well to come to the right answer for your country.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out.
We have one question from Susanne. Who was the driving force for this better alignment between the two parts?
I would say it was mutual.
Yeah, shared. So you both sides saw the need to be better aligned and to communicate. Yeah.
I think Sorry, just one more quick note. I believe that the advantages. Actually, let me start over. There are only advantages of organizing in some meaningful way, mostly because in our point of view, it doesn't make sense for both parties to do both loads, both parts of the work. So this way, everyone has less work to do, and every task is done by the best candidate. So yes, I believe that the need was mutual.
Fredrik, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
no, I was going to ask, and maybe part of the answer was in what you just said, but I was also curious, a lot of the things that you described, how you are working and how you have developed it to be more efficient. Theoretically, I think many can agree, but then when it comes to practice, how do you make this happen? It's very often difficult. How do you convince another part of your organization, or how do you convince another agency, or how do you convince the ministry? There need to be someone that has a sort of that feels responsible for a better holistic picture. And this was my question. In your case, is it because there has been so clear mutual interests, or is it because you have been very engaged, you and your colleagues, or who has been the driving force? Do you have an idea on that? Or what do you think is the success factor behind that you've actually managed to address these things?
So perhaps I should open with the fact that I wasn't actually there present for the negotiations. However, it was I believe that there are a number of factors. First of all, as I have mentioned, the national strategy is encouraging international cooperation. And for us, this is quite new. It's not only new for the technology agency, but involvement in the horizon is not something that would be just common knowledge for all the players in the field in the Czech Republic. And we have in TACR there is one person. There's a colleague of ours. She's the deputy director who is extremely motivated in setting some mutual cooperation. And I believe that she's very skilled and she's also extremely experienced. And I believe that a lot of credit goes to her simply because she really, really, really wanted to make this happen, and she's very good at this. Her name is Tanya Halova Perglova. And besides, as I said, yes, there is the common goal. We all want to support international cooperation, and well, it's a lot of work. So it's better to split. It works, in my opinion. There was no any arm twisting. It's simply there's a lot of work, and we were all motivated to find a way to split the work and do it in the way that everybody does what they're best at. I hope that answers your question.
That was a very good answer, and I guess,
I think-
like many things, it comes down to the people around it, which I was suspecting. I mean, I can hear from your presentations that you're really competent on this, but now you gave also more. There are more people around that has a driving force. That's good. I don't want to take more time. We were waiting also for Michaela's presentation. I don't know, Michael, if you have more questions, but
No, I don't.
really
Get it,
interesting.
you?
Thanks.
Well, perhaps I would also like to say that the credit doesn't only go to TACR, the credit also goes to the ministries. There are some extremely qualified people in the ministries, and we wouldn't be able to pull it off without them. And they're also very motivated. And as I said, there was no arm twisting. We all want the best for the projects and for the program. So, in fact, we have, before coming here, we had an alignment call to discuss whether they should perhaps be part of the presentation. And we have prepared this presentation in cooperation with them. We have previously agreed on all the talking points, and we are here talking, but they are behind the scene helping us to do this. So I would like to say thank you.
Very good. Cool. Really cool to hear. So, I excuse me, please, for jumping in and changing the agenda a little bit, but I thought it was easier to keep the focus. And Michaela, sorry for keeping you some steps from your presentation, but now the floor is definitely yours.
Thank you. All right. So Baya, are you continuing to share? Okay, thank you. Well, this part is the rest of the second block, and it's not going to be very long. So I just have 2 more slides left. But this is just to give you an overview of what we do during the eligibility check of the projects. So as we mentioned, the most important criterion for us is that the project meets the definition of applied research, because we can only fund applied research in the projects. So we check whether the research results correspond to the national rules and that they are exploitable. So here this is done through the check of the project proposal. It has to include a clear description of the exploitation plan. And also, the Czech applicants have to submit their own Czech mandatory attachments, where they also describe the research results that they plan to achieve. Then, the aim of the project has to be relevant to the overall aim of the funding program. This is also quite a tricky part, since there are 2 different levels. So you have the themes of the call, and then you have the general aim of the funding program. So there has to be an overlap between those 2 things, and we are bound by this part. So this is also something that we at this point have to check at the part of the eligibility check. And then there are 2 categories of applied research. It's the industrial research and experimental development, based on which of them they perform. It's determined the aid intensity that the applicants can get. And there's a second factor which determines the aid intensity, that is the type of applicant, whether it's a small, medium, large enterprise, or a research organization. So there are more different factors. Then, of course, we check whether the applicants are eligible based on the national rules. So if it's the right type of applicant, a company or research organization, whether the costs are eligible, so whether they fall under all the different categories that are specified in our national rules. Then the funding that the applicants request has to meet the national regulations for aid intensity. So this is determined by the funding program, but it's also different for every call. And we almost never grant the full 100% of the total costs. We usually give something between 60 and 85%. For the latest AeroNet calls, it was the higher numbers. Then the applicants have to meet the obligation to publish their financial statements, of course, and they have to submit the mandatory forms proving that they're eligible. So these are separate Czech mandatory attachments as our own application form, where they mainly specify the budget, the type of research that they're doing, and the results, and then a sworn statement. Next slide, please. Right. So now I'm just going to give you an example of how we cooperated with the program owner on the biodiversity co-funding call. So here, the program owner is the Ministry of Environment, and TACR is the program manager. And at first, we were contacted by the coordinator of the biodiversity co-fund, and then the Ministry of Environment has done the survey on the absorption capacity. That is, they checked how many research institutions would be interested in taking part. And then we were charged to manage this program. Each of us has a different role in the different bodies of this co-fund. So sorry, here it's written BioDevClim, but it's of course BioDevRestore, General Assembly. There is the Ministry of Environment, and in the BioDevRestore Call Steering Committee, there are the representatives of the TACR. During the phase of call preparation, we have worked jointly with the Ministry of Environment. So the topic selection was mainly their domain. They have sent their own expert to the topic selection meeting. Then, based on the funding program, we have determined the allocation of originally 300,000 euros, but then we increased it to 800,000 euros based on high interest of the Czech researchers. And this was done based on joint negotiations between the two parties. Then the national funding rules were prepared by TECR, but we have, of course, discussed with the Ministry of Environment about the specifics of the rules, and they were approved by them as well. The experts were nominated by both the Ministry of Environment and TECR to the evaluation panel. And both of us have communicated news about the call pre-announcement, the call announcement, and the updates. And then we have also cooperated with them on the national eligibility check, where we have done most of the formal parts, and the ministry has also helped us to check whether the projects are in line with the funding program, because this is of course their program. And then the last part, the call implementation, it's mainly our role of TECR, but of course there are ad hoc consultations with the ministry whenever it's needed. Thank you. So that's the end of this part.
Thank you, Michaela. Very good and very practical. And I immediately leave the floor to Fredrik and Gerdy, who are much more in those practicalities than I am. So you might have the better questions than I have.
Well, yes, thank you very much, Michaela. That was very clear. I'm still struggling a bit with how you're organizing it, because you have a national program and part of the money of this national program is available for transnational projects, if I'm correct.
Yes, exactly. So we have those national programs which were originally prepared not for the AirNet co-fund calls, but we are using them as well. And this is sometimes problematic now at this point, but of course we are now working to improve the system to have a specific program just for the calls. But as we started, we needed some money, and we didn't have just extra money lying there, so we needed to use the existing programs. And so we were trying to find as big of an overlap as could be for those funding programs. And usually it works pretty well for the AirNets, but of course sometimes there are borderline cases where you are not sure whether this is actually part of the program or not. So this is being checked on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Can I ask?
Thank you. That's really clarifying for me. Thank you.
Sorry, Gerdy. I just a direct follow up. So what happens then if they are not fully in line? You still think this is a good application, but it's not relevant to the program fully, or how do you handle that usually?
Yeah. So since usually AirNet co-funds are organized in 2 rounds, then we have the opportunity to give these applicants some remarks. And they also have a chance to maybe improve it, slightly shift it, or do something about the problem that we have identified. This is also a thing that we do with the question of applicability of the research results. Sometimes when we don't think that this is sufficient, where, for example, they don't mention sufficiently how they're going to exploit their results, we ask them to specify that in the full proposal, or give us some further information about this. So it's actually quite good for us that we have this chance in the second phase when we can require a little bit more information from the applicants.
Okay, that's good. I have one more follow-up question, not directly on that, but you had a very good, I think, the checklist for your eligibility check. That I think there are many of us that probably it could be a good format to use and adapt for those that don't have it clear all the time exactly how they check the eligibility. But given the fact that all AirNets are usually different, they don't work exactly in the same way. Is this something you have experienced now with being part of many different AirNets, that sometimes this becomes a difficulty that you need to adapt that to work with the specific AirNet and that process, or is it usually it's so general so it's not a problem?
Yeah, it depends a lot on which AirNet we are working with at the very moment. So of course there's a difference if you have a call with 2 rounds or just 1 round. It depends on the specific processes that are part of the selection process, and it's a lot also about clarifying this to the call secretariat and everyone else who's involved in the joint proposals. So usually we just for us this is really like the basic criterion that we have to fund applied research. So from our experience, this is something that is the most difficult. Always we have to explain this over and over to all the consortia that there is no way for us to go around this. So we have to again make remarks to the projects and give them further instructions on this. So this can be this is quite challenging, for instance, in case of the environmental calls where the applicability is sometimes not so straightforward. So there's a lot of back and forth communication both with the secretariat and with the applicants.
Thanks a lot for that.
So I'm just looking into the chat if we have another question. Seems not to be the case at the moment. Anything else to be discussed on this topic? If this is not the case, then I would propose to jump into the next and final presentation session of today. That is about communication with applicants. I think that's also very important. How can we inform and attract people? How can we help them link to the consortia partners from other countries and so forth? That's very important to make these joint calls successful, and I give you the floor to go into this part of the presentation.
Thank you very much. All right, so now I would like to continue with some further information about how we communicate with applicants, because as Michael mentioned, this is of course a very important part of our work. And it was essential, especially in the beginning when we started with AirNets, because this scheme wasn't very, the researchers weren't very familiar with all the processes, how it all worked, and how they should apply it, everything about starting from the application to the evaluation. So there we have developed quite an elaborate system of how we communicate with them. Next slide, please. So our first primary source of information for the applicants, of course, our own website. We have both Czech and English version. We always have a page dedicated specifically to the general information about the call. And then we post specific news regarding the updates about the call preparation, topic selection, pre-announcement, call announcement, and then of course about the results. Then we of course post information about webinars. We have our own Czech webinars only for the Czech applicants, but also information about the international webinars, which are organized by the call secretariat. And then on the English website, we also have a general page with static information about the call. And we have a section dedicated to news with regular updates on the call announcement, etc. And for every call, we prepare guidelines for Czech applicants, which is a document of usually some 20 pages, where we explain the whole process step by step. What is the connection of the national funding program and the international rules, which is something that of course wasn't very clear in the beginning to the applicants. We explain things about on things which work on the national level, but also some of the international funding rules and how they relate. So you have everything from the start of how they select a topic, the right applicants, how they can plan their budget, and so on. Then we prepare the document with national funding rules, where it's like a brief overview. I will show you later on how it works. It's just a brief overview of the call, the funding program, and applicants which are eligible. To stay in touch with everyone, we also send a newsletter once a month. We have approximately 2,000 subscribers. So there we put information about the call announcement and pre-announcement, and also some following updates. TCR also has its own magazine. It's called Tady, and it's issued both in a printed and online version. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here you can see an example of our website dedicated to the Xystera calls. So you can see that we have a part dedicated to call 2020 and last calls as well. Here it's just an overview again of when the launch, when the call was launched, when is the deadline for submission, what's our allocation, who are the eligible applicants. There is a link to the website of the ERINET, and there is a section dedicated just for the latest updates with the news about the call. Next slide. And this is in Czech, but again, this is news about the call announcement or pre-announcement of the joint call Xystera, where we put some general information about when the call is going to be open, what are the topics of the call, who would be the countries that would participate, and what's the deadline, and the link to the national funding rules. Next slide. We also have on our website an event calendar where we post information about webinars or on consultations with the applicants. So here you can see an example of the Quantera webinar that we have organized jointly with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, which is our partner organization in the ERINET as well. Next slide. And this is a clipping from the guidelines for the Czech applicants. So this is just a journal. I know it's in Czech, so again, you're not going to understand it very much, but I'm going to just briefly introduce. So there is information about who are the eligible applicants, how can they select their partners in the international consortium, what they need to have in their project, what are the supported results that we can fund. Then information about the budget, the aid intensity, what are the eligible costs. And the next chapter gives them information about how they can submit the project through the international system. And then it follows with the information on the evaluation and selection of the projects for funding. Next slide, please. And here is an example of the national funding rules for NR Digit Call 2020. So in the first page, you can see an overview of the call. What are the call topics, and some basic information about the funding program on the national level, who is the contact person, who are the eligible applicants, etc. Next slide. This is a clipping from the Tady magazine. This is the magazine of the technology agency, where you have like this sort of an ad for researchers who are interested in some big international projects, and information about the upcoming calls. These are calls which were coming in 2019, and again here you have some brief information about the launch of the call, the allocation, and the deadline for submission. Next slide. And apart from our own website, we also use mailing to relevant Czech communities to stay in touch with them. We mail to research organizations, enterprises, and chambers of commerce. We use contact sources like our system ISTA or Starfos. Starfos is a database of all funded projects, not only by TECR, but also by other funders in the Czech Republic. And to them, we forward information about the upcoming calls. And then to be able to contact also new applicants, to reach out to people who have not previously been involved in such project, we also post on social networks. So we use Twitter quite a lot. And then LinkedIn, which is used also quite broadly in the Czech research community. So this is quite a good communication channel for us as well. And then sometimes we use Facebook too, but this is not really our primary source of information. Next slide. Yeah, here you can see some tweets that we posted. First of them, this is a repost of the call announcement, where we just reiterated that the call will end soon, and they have some last few days to submit their proposal. And the next post is about the Quantera call and the webinar that we organize for the Czech applicants. Next slide. Here you can see a LinkedIn post that we posted also about it's a call announcement that the call Aramin has been launched. Next slide. And apart from our own communication channel, we also use partners' websites and some other communication channels, like the website czechresearch.com, which is administered by Czech Invest, which supports business development and investments in the Czech Republic. And the server H2020, which is administered by the Technology Center of the Czech Academy of Sciences. They repost quite a lot of information about our webinars, call announcement, reminders, and so on. Then two major servers informing about Czech research, which is Věda Výzkum or Evropský výzkum.cz. And we also had a post in M Magazine, which is a magazine of the Masaryk University. Next slide. And then, of course, apart from the online communication, we also present information at various conferences and webinars. Lately, it's mainly webinars, of course. There was, for example, a workshop on funding of international research cooperation at the Czech Institute of Informatics, Robotics, and Cybernetics. We have organized virtual international networking. And from our own webinars, for example, there was the EnerDigit webinar in autumn last year, and one webinar for 3 different ERNIT calls, Euronandomet, Aramin, and Xystera, where we had some 60 attendees. And last but not least, of course, when the program owner is a ministry, they also relay this information about the call announcement on their own website, and they distribute it through their own communication channels. Next slide. So this is an example of the website of the Ministry of Environment, where they have posted information about the call announcement of the biodiversity call that we prepared jointly with them in autumn of last year. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Michaela. Very interesting, very detailed. Also to see how creative you've been to use different channels to loop people in, to get them informed. Also here, switching over to Fredrik and Gerdi, as you are much more related to those practicalities. Any observations?
Well, yes, I think that that this is really a very thorough approach in spreading this information about all the international calls that are going on, and congratulations to you with that. I'm curious to hear a bit more about the response of your applicants. Do you have much interest and also much proposals going on in Czech Republic? Are you satisfied about that?
Yes, so in general, the number of people that are interested and that apply for the course is growing. It's growing quite a lot. Of course, it depends. We don't know exactly whether this is just due to the communication or just the research community is now more used to this scheme and they are more aware of how it all works. And we have some people who have applied in previous course and they are reapplying, so they already have this information and this experience. But we would also like to do a survey of actually the effectiveness of this whole system to find out which channels have worked the best for us to be able to streamline our efforts and to focus on the channels that work a lot for the researchers. But in general, I would say it looks like we have been able to reach out to quite a lot of different researchers.
I mean, one important question is how to get people informed from your national agency about things that are ongoing. Another question is how do they find their way into the consortia with people from and actors from other countries? We have made the experience from the joint programming platform Smart Energy Systems that we have provided a digital matchmaking platform, and one of our late coming partners in the network were our colleagues from Turkey, from TÜBİTAK, and they always beat the drum that it was important that we provided this matchmaking platform because at the beginning they had hard times to get their stakeholders involved in the transnational consortia, but by using this platform, they have been quite successful. Do you have any experiences with this kind of tools from your community or the networks that you are active in? I mean, with the new Enerdigit you have now the possibility, then you will have the experience.
Yes, but those tools generally work in most of the areas that we are involved in. So I think this is very good to give the researchers which don't have the network yet to be able to get involved in if they have an interesting project. But from our experience, it's also very often it happens that the Czech researchers are contacted by the colleagues from abroad, and they just tell them to join their team. And so far, there's not that many coordinators of the research projects. It's more like they are gaining experience until they will be able to lead the projects themselves. But I think those platforms in general are quite important for the researchers, and it's good that it's always specifically for the different ARNet calls, which is focused on one call, because we also tried our own partner search tool, which would go broadly to all different ARNet calls, but that didn't seem to work that well.
There's also a question in the chat on how many people are there working to prepare all this information and the interaction with the national applicants.
Yeah, so we have one colleague who is specifically dedicated just to the communication part of all the different areas that we are involved in. But it's always on a cooperative basis. So all the contact points for the different calls, they always work jointly with her on the preparation of all those different documents. But yeah, it's quite a workload for all of us. So we also have just our specific PR team who is dedicated only to PR. I mean, on the level of the whole agency. But for us, for AirNets, we have one dedicated person who only does the communication about AirNet COFAN calls.
Perhaps I can provide another piece of information just to summarize. In our case, the preparation of the promotion materials is usually the responsibility of two people. First, the project officer, in which case would be Michaela, and the other colleague, who takes care of the graphic and, well, her responsibility is to make it pretty, while the project officer provides the information, the background. So technically, for international cooperation, this is a matter of two people. But then comes the task of actually sharing the material, promoting, actively spreading and disseminating the information, which is a cooperation of not only the ACR but also other players in the environment, also the ministry and other support centers.
Thank you.
Frederick, are you still there, or do we miss you already? Yes, he is there.
Yeah.
Any other points to discuss? Gerdy, just go on if you.
I was also curious to hear a bit more about, are you, when you have had a call, do you usually use the money that you plan to spend on a call, or is that still a struggle for the Czech Republic?
Yes, it depends on the different aeronets. So some of them we still have some allocation left with the projects that we would like to fund more. We have more money, but still some projects were not selected. But with some calls, we had a huge success where we were actually quite restricted. We had to increase the allocation a few times, and still it wasn't enough. So with some calls, it really some calls are very, very popular in the Czech community, and the researchers are also very successful. So
that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really great for us.
Cool. So step by step, our discussion is coming to an end. Do we have some summarizing topics for today? I think it was a very impressive, detailed look into those homeworks that we have to do within our organizations to be successful and prepared for the collaboration. And to be honest, I personally didn't expect that. I was not so sure about this topic from the beginning on, but of course, always open, and you made it really a very successful event, I think, and a very interesting event. Thanks a lot for this.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It was an interesting experience for us also.
Cool, and we of course hope that you somehow will become members of the team to manage the clean energy transition partnerships, because exactly, I think the kind of spirit you are showing here is what we exactly need in the team. So think about it. And we hope that you will become active in the talks that we're going to have very soon in the coming months about how we set up this new initiative.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to meet you there. Frederick, you want to?
Can I just ask you? I mean, just to agree on what the others have said. This has been very valuable, and I think maybe put it on my agency, but my personal sort of journey with the aeronets has not been structured in the way that you have described, or make it more of finding problems, learning them, and then afterwards trying to have some kind of picture. And with the picture you described today, I think can be helpful for anyone that at the beginning of that journey or in the middle of that journey to get an idea of this is how things come to. I think this will be valuable to share with others. And I know also for my sake, internally in our organization, there are many good practices that we can learn from. And I can also add to what you said last, Michael, that of course we are always interested to collaborate more and learn more. So I can definitely say it would be good to have you more active also in the CETP or other parts of the international collaboration. That would be something that we would really like to encourage.
Thank
Cool,
you.
yes. I
Thanks a lot.
can only underpin what Fredrik has also said on it's nearly a tutorial that you gave today, and I can tell you I'm receiving emails on every kind of questions. When do we have to have the money ready? What do we have to do how can we know what to do at this and this stage? This will be very, very useful to be shared with others that have similar questions, as Fredrik said. So thanks a lot for this. Gary, any final remarks you want to make?
No, I fully agree.
Wonderful. One thing,
Perhaps,
yes, please.
perhaps I would just like to read the comment from our colleague from the Ministry of Industry and Trade, who has posted a comment that
Hi,
they
Shimon.
support
Thanks
the
a lot
message.
for joining.
Unfortunately, we didn't want to overwhelm you with too many speakers, so even though they were very interested in being part of the presentation, we in the end decided that it would be best if we just had 2 speakers. But again, I would like to thank them for their support. And what he says is that they are indeed trying to be as active on all levels, and they are covering all the priorities as much as they can. So that is true. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much for this commitment. So then I think it's up to me just to announce a little bit the future, as I tried to do at the beginning already. What you cannot see very properly here, but what I want to advertise on is the LinkedIn group that we have formed around this CETP program dialogues. I've just posted this morning an update on the upcoming events. So please put it into your schedule, save the dates for the upcoming presentations. 26th of March, we are talking about the Stadt der Zukunft program from Austria and the Vorzeigeregion Energie, 2 formats that we have developed in Austria around the challenge-driven and approach and mission-driven approach. Also on 16th of April, RVO from the Netherlands will have a presentation. Gary, you wanted to translate something? Oh, you mean the programs? Yeah, thanks a lot. So the German names of the Austrian programs. So Stadt der Zukunft is about the city of tomorrow. So it's built around the idea of innovation in the context of cities. Thanks a lot for this hint, Gary. And Vorzeigeregion is something like showcase regions in Austria. It has turned out to become 3 big clusters of innovation that are based in some of the Austrian regions, and they have developed their own topics and missions, and they will report how they are working with this now. So on 16th of April, we will get some Netherlands examples. Gary, I don't have it at hand. Can you say 3 words about it, what it will be?
Yes, we have developed a mission-driven multi-annual program for research and innovation last year, and that will be presented on the 16th of November. The thinking behind it, the connection to the climate agreement that we have, and some early experiences.
Very cool, thanks. And then we have a very interesting, and I think, as I've heard about, very successful also program from Sweden, the Viable Cities. Fredrik, a word from your side about this program?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting program. I look forward to hear also from them. I'm not personally involved, but they have been very successful in the urban sphere, and specifically they are also a joint collaboration between various funding agencies in Sweden, which is not always the case. Like in many of the aeronets, it's one funding partner, but in the Viable Cities, it's a partnership between various funding agencies. So there is, you could say, a little bit of an aeronet on a national level, as well as it participates in international collaboration through Urban Europe and other networks.
Good point. Thanks a lot. We invite you all to join also these sessions that turn the scope a little bit away from the transnational collaborations to some interesting national formats. If you have a program on your national level that you think is interesting for this series, we are always open to take more examples. But we also in parallel, and those goes to all the all our audience that is already interested to start the discussion on how to design the clean energy transition partnership. We will not wait until the end of this series of events before starting talking to this. We will come up immediately with a proposal how to plan the meetings on the design phase of the clean energy transition partnership. So don't worry, we don't wait until the end of this series of dialogue events until we're going to start to talk about the design of the clean energy transition partnership. So thanks a lot for joining today. Stay tuned, use the LinkedIn group, and very last, Nicholas, you maybe have some hints for the audience. If you don't use LinkedIn, how you can stay connected and get the relevant information in time.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. So either you're joining the LinkedIn group, as Michael already pointed out. There's also the opportunity to send me an email to the address I just have posted in the chat through this Intelligente Welt channel. And as always, please register to Xpera as an expert if you want to have all the information that is also regarding the next steps of the CETP, not only the programs dialogues. And send me an email if you do, so I can also put you on the distribution list for the next dialogues. But in the meantime, like, my mailbox is always open if you're interested, and you will get an invitation in that case. So thanks for the attention and for attending this session. And Michael, please, the closing words.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you also for the great work you're doing to organize this series of events. And yeah, that's it for today. Have a very nice weekend, and we hope that you stay tuned for the upcoming events. See you soon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.